Good morning, DawgNation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. Let me give you a couple of programming notes here off the top. First of all, I'm going to have to beg your pardon on this. For the foreseeable future, before the show begins, we are not going to take live comments. Of course, I encourage you to chat with each other and do as you always do, and I'm sure that you will. But for the foreseeable future, the pre-show that we have been doing where we take comments, we're just not going to do that right now for, if you've been with us, what I would imagine are probably obvious reasons. Also, today, very special treat for you. At the conclusion of the show, we're going to have a couple of special guests step in and do our R.S. Andrews cool down. You love Cody Chaffins, you love Kaylee Manziel. They're going to be with us today for our R.S. Andrews cool down. So you're going to love that from them, stepping in to do some commentary with you when the show is done. And I'm sure you are very excited about the chance to hear from both of them. Also, I'll tell you about a really fun announcement we have coming up today about a contest we have ongoing here at DawgNation, which I know you're going to want your shot to win. We'll tell you about that here coming up in just a little bit too. But prior to that, though, a lot about Georgia-Bama. The stakes could not be higher. Kirby Smart making that very clear. We'll talk about what that means for Georgia in this particular game. Plus, we'll bring on Connor Riley and Jake Fromm, two terrific guests, and we'll continue to double down on why fans play a very important role coming up on Saturday. It's all on the way. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by ServPro, cleaning, restoration, construction.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I have a lot of faults. You don't have to look very far to find them. But hopefully one of the things that I get right or do well is I do try to be an honest person. I think honesty is important, and I try to be a very honest person. And by way of honesty, here's what I'm going to tell you. Do you know what spin is? You ever watch political debates, things like that? When the debate is over, all of the what do you call them, like colleagues or hangers-on or handlers, whatever else, for the particular candidate, they go into a room and they start talking about why their candidate was the best, and no matter what it is you think you may have seen in the debate, here's what actually happened, and here's why my guy or gal or whomever it happens to be, here's why they won. That's spin. And spin exists beyond just politics. It exists in life too. In a couple of moments' time, I'm going to spin something in a pro-Georgia direction. I'm telling you now, so when it happens, you'll be like, oh yeah, BA said he was going to do this. But I do think that spin is not always a lie. Spin is not always a negative thing. Sometimes when you spin something around and you look at it from a different vantage point, what you get is what I think can be really valuable. You get a reframe. You get a chance to see something that you may have looked at the same way for a very long time. You get a chance to now look at that in a completely different direction, and I think that can be pretty important. So in a minute, I'm going to spin something in the Georgia direction, but by spinning it around, maybe it gives us a valuable reframe. Let me lead into it this way. There is no doubt that Saturday's game is monumental between Georgia and Alabama. Very important to acknowledge and to keep acknowledging that for the very first time in what is now going into year 10 of Kirby Smart, Alabama coming into Sanford Stadium for the very first time ever. That's a weird thing that it's true. It's one of the reasons why the SEC's about to change its scheduling format for the future, so you won't have these weird anomalies in future years as much as you've had them in the past. But it's important to note that Bama in Athens for the first time since Kirby Smart has been the Georgia coach. To say the same thing a different way, the last time Alabama came to Athens, Kirby Smart, as you know, was still the Alabama defensive coordinator. And given the size of the game, given the stakes at play, given the recent history between these two teams, which feels like it could fill volumes of books if you wanted to write those, Kirby Smart, I believe, was wise in speaking about the game this week for the first time when he spoke yesterday, to not do what sometimes Kirby might be tempted to do, or what sometimes coaches of all stripes might be tempted to do. The sort of thing where you say, oh, one game at a time, this is just our next opponent, blah, 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 blah. You obviously have to approach the game that way in a certain respect, But clearly, this is not quite the same as just any old other football game that Georgia might play. And Kirby Smart, in his own way, I believe correctly, acknowledged that yesterday. This is what Smart said.
Excited, big stage, big time game. Athens, economic impact on this city and just what it's done for the community is going to be huge. We've got a lot of great home games, but this is one of the feature ones and really good program. Coach DeBoer's done a great job to me, trying to fill some mighty big shoes, and he is doing a great job in his own right in the way he approaches things. They got a good football team, big, physical, fast team, just like they've always been, and should be an exciting game.
So I think it's interesting that in that particular clip, Smart, in addition to talking about the big stage the game's going to be played on, also pivots to the economic impact in Athens. And it's funny, I was talking to a good friend, Georgia fan, last week, and he was telling me, having spent some time in Athens, that he said, man, this city's already popping about this game, and it's still 2 Saturdays away. So whatever economic impact that the game has on Athens, apparently, according to those who were in the Classic City last week, you were already feeling some of that. So pretty clearly there is a vibe in the air that suggests this isn't just any old football game. This is Georgia and Alabama taking place for the first time in Athens. But the question is, and this is where the spin of all this comes in, the question is, how do you keep from making it too big? Because I think both sides on Saturday will have that as a challenge. You got to admit, this is a bigger game than most. This is a bigger game than even the typical big game of a normal season. But how do you keep from making it too big? And this is where the reframe on all of this comes in. And this is one of the things that I think everyone needs to understand. That because, and I said this going into the Tennessee game, it's worth repeating again here today, that because we are so deeply entrenched into Georgia football, and that's not a bad thing. It's our favorite team. It's our favorite pastime. And, of course, we're going to examine all of the things around Georgia football in almost microscopic fashion. Of course, we're going to do that. But by magnifying things so closely, oftentimes it gives us a distorted view. And going into the Tennessee game, what I said was, hey, y'all think that Georgia's got something to prove. Not by y'all. I don't mean all of y'all. I mean just some people. Y'all think that Georgia's got something to prove because Georgia's got the new quarterback. It didn't play great against Austin Peay, whatever else. But in actuality, it's Tennessee who is trying to build something under Josh Heupel, has not played well yet against Georgia. It's actually probably Tennessee who has more to prove in this game than Georgia does. It's actually Tennessee in this spot who may be playing with more pressure. And if we would say that about the Georgia-Tennessee game, I think it's also appropriate to say that about Georgia-Alabama as well. And let me explain it this way. And this is where I'm going to put my spin doctor hat on just for a moment, but also while doing so, maybe give you a valuable reframe. People will say, oh, Georgia has had such trouble against Alabama that this is the game that matters the most for Georgia because Georgia's got to solve its Alabama problem. And Kirby Smart's got to get, past what has been the kryptonite for him thus far in his Georgia career. And at first glance, the facts seem to back that up. Lost in the 2017 National Championship game, 2018 SEC Championship game, pandemic year of 2020, 2021 SEC Championship game, 2023 SEC Championship game, and then, of course, last year in Tuscaloosa. Those results would seem to speak for themselves. But what if something else was slightly true? What if the 2017, 2018 games came at a time in which Kirby Smart was still building up the Georgia program? And frankly, Georgia was a fairly sizable underdog in both of those games. What if it was, as viewed at the time, a remarkable accomplishment that Georgia was even being given the chance to play in those games? Certainly the 2017 National Championship game, that was true. And the idea that you judge Kirby harshly or Georgia harshly because it wasn't better than Alabama already by year 2 or year 3 of Kirby Smart's tenure as a head coach in those early stages for Georgia. Well, looking at it that way, that seems almost unfair. 2020, a little bit of a different story, but at the same time, we'll all acknowledge that 2020 was a very weird year. On paper, Georgia probably had more defensive talent on the 2020 team than it maybe even had on the 2021 team, and yet rarely played like it that season because we're led to believe during the pandemic, nobody was really practicing the way they normally do. Certainly Georgia wasn't able to. The 2020 feels like a bit of a one-off, and I'm not quite so sure when we think back on anybody's history from college football. And, we're going to be looking at the 2020 season as all that indicative of anything that happens. Well, then you'll look at the 2021 SEC championship game, and obviously a game which Georgia played terribly. But can't we all agree that the 2021 SEC championship game was rendered pretty meaningless, was essentially erased in the annals of history because of the rematch that took place a few weeks later? The game that actually counted, the game that actually mattered, that's the game that Georgia won. Now, ultimately, you can't explain away the 2023 and 2024 games quite as easily. But in the case of 2023, are you really going to come down too hard on Georgia because it didn't keep, 30-game winning streak alive and didn't go on to win a third straight national championship? If that's the most you can bang on Georgia for, then ultimately you're probably grasping at straws at that point, which leads us to last year, which is the game that probably sticks with you maybe the most because Georgia certainly didn't play very well. But it's not like, given the fact that Alabama had the home field advantage in that game, it's not like Georgia and Alabama have always been fighting as equals on the same platform, on the same playing field. It hasn't necessarily always been the case. That's why Georgia getting this game at home on Saturday really matters. And that's why Kirby, as the very established coach, who has seen his program in this decade win 2 national championships, something that Alabama, by the way, even at the end of the Nick Saban tenure, was not doing, its most recent coming in 2020. That's why this game on Saturday gives Georgia a chance to not be the team that makes it more than it needs to be, and frankly, to not be the team who's playing with the most pressure in the game. Because as Kirby said in the clip we played for you a moment ago, this is Kalen DeBoer still trying to figure out, can he fill the very prodigious shoes left behind by Nick Saban? And yesterday, when Smart met with the media, he gave his evaluation of exactly how he thinks Kalen DeBoer is doing that thus far. Here's Kirby again.
I think he's still doing that. I think it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. To go into to take that situation and go into it takes someone very confident in themselves. And I think he's proven that, he's won everywhere he's been. He's been very successful everywhere he's been. He's not afraid to do it his way and be good at it. I'm sure he's absorbed some things that he wanted to keep the same. But at the end of the day, it's buy-in, it's players, it's the coaching staff, it's everybody involved. It's a lot to be measured against, obviously, but he knew that before he took it.
So the point here is Kalen DeBoer as a coach is still being judged. He's won everywhere he's been, as Kirby Smart says, but that as a designation is fairly meaningless to me because had he not won everywhere he's been, he wouldn't even be a candidate for the Alabama job. It's what he does now moving forward that is going to determine what Alabama fans feel about him and what the college football public at large feels about Kalen DeBoer. And right now the results are mixed. And this is another reason I believe that the true pressure on Saturday doesn't rest with Kirby Smart and how does he solve his Alabama problem. It actually rests with Kalen DeBoer and can he fix what has been a much more significant problem for his team in the very recent past. As we alluded to yesterday, Alabama's just 1-4 in its last 5 road games. And that's why this game, this moment for Georgia is so significant. It's a chance to create the kind of atmosphere that allows that to become now 1-5 in road games. And you better believe that is a talking point that Kalen DeBoer is having a hard time escaping. It comes up even in his press conference this week of already this season, we've seen Alabama lose a road game. In the case of Florida State week 1, it was the sort of road game they were expected to win easily, but instead it was Florida State who handled the Crimson Tide easily. How do you prevent that from happening again? That's one of the things that Kalen DeBoer was talking about this week to give you an idea of the sort of pressure he's facing coming into Saturday. This is DeBoer from yesterday.
Yeah, whatever we've asked of this group, they've just been so coachable and, I think talking through and going through, what we've experienced together, you got to prove it on the football field, but just the way that they want to respond in practice, I think, has carried over into what we've done, at least in these home games, these last 2 weeks. And so, we got to be resilient. We know there's going to be storms that we're going to have to weather in the SEC, on the road. and you gotta do it. No one else is going to go do it for you. I know there's a high want-to factor that this group has. Again, they've shown it in the work, they've shown it in their preparation, and that's the key. Really, just prepare, invest, and do everything you can to be confident and do something special together. And so, I just ask these guys to empty the tank every single day, and they've done that, and that's what we got to do on Saturday. But we're going to have to be resilient, and understand that adversity against good football teams is going to happen, and know what our response is going to be, choose our response, and understand what that looks like even now, not just when it happens.
Let me ask you a question. It's a simple one. Does that sound like a coach who enjoys that as a topic right now? The notion that Alabama has not been able to win games away from home, that it got really embarrassed at the hands of Florida State. Does that sound like a coach who's comfortable with that discussion right now? Because there were follow-ups to that too, including, yeah, all that's nice, but do you plan on doing anything differently? Do you have a different strategy, a different approach? Do you have some plan in place to keep the road game disaster from happening to you again in this hostile environment on Saturday? More from Kalen DeBoer.
I think you do the same things. You might tweak something here and there, but I think it still comes down to, your preparation and execution. Every game's a little different depending on how far you travel and all that, where you're staying. And that's a lot of the times how the coordination of the schedule, might be impacted. And so for us, the flight and then the drive the next morning, that's going to be different than it is in some other cities that we go to. So again, it just comes down to keeping the main thing. You are certainly, in our case, always really trying to find the little thing here and there that might, help us with the juice, the energy, whatever it might be. But we also don't want to make something out of nothing. And, we want to make sure we're focused on the right things. And that's just, playing as hard as we can, giving everything we have to our preparation and going out there and playing physical, sound, disciplined football.
I love what DeBoer says at the end from the perspective of a Georgia fan. He says, we want to be careful not to make something out of nothing. In other words, yeah, we're under a little bit of pressure to do better in road games, and this is a tough one to do well in, but we don't want to feel that pressure too much because that pressure, sometimes pressure makes diamonds, but sometimes pressure also causes folks to wilt in the face of it. And that's really what I think Saturday's about. Does Georgia feel the pressure because of the opponent that it's playing? Does Alabama feel the pressure because of the place where it's playing? Those are the big questions that loom over this game. As a Georgia fan, what I hope is true is this, that while Georgia is hungry for this win because it's gotten so few against Alabama, Kalen DeBoer is actually desperate for this win. It's his team and his program that didn't make the playoff a year ago. It's his job status that, at least in terms of his long-term future, that is still in question. These are the kinds of wins that it's not just nice to have, but he has to have if he's going to remain an employee in good standing for years to come. You hope Alabama feels that pressure on Saturday. As a Georgia fan, you want to make sure you put that pressure on them. And how does that happen? Well, we're going to talk more about that coming up. But first, let's take some time to introduce the show. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by ServPro. Glad you are with us. No matter how you get to us, it's video, of course, live 10 a.m., radio, Athens Sports Radio 960, the Rev podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. We are just very glad that you are here, whichever platform you choose to use. By the way, big thanks to our friends at ServPro who make it all possible. Now, talk about pressure in a football game. Obviously, some of the pressure you feel in life is when the thing that you love, your own home, when it's damaged. It's amazing the emotional impact that can have on you if, water pipe breaks or if a roof were to collapse, cave in, or sometimes it's a fire. House fires happen all the time. I hope it doesn't happen to you, but as you know, this can happen. Or maybe it's not the home you live in. Maybe it's the warehouse where your business is located, or perhaps you have rental property for passive income. That's one of the ways you're funding your retirement. An important thing to consider, an important thing to do. And if you depend on some sort of property as income producing for you, well, of course, taking the best care of it and protecting it against loss, one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make. And if damage has occurred for you, this is where our friends at Serve Pro are going to be really important for you, because they are restoration specialists. They can get your property cleaned back up to its previous condition, literally leaving it looking, let me try to speak English, leaving it looking like it never even happened. That's what Serve Pro is all about. So if you've got a large-scale job, perhaps it encompasses an entire city block, or if it's just your home, your family's home that you've lived in for a long time, from big to small, everything in between, Serve Pro wants to do great work for you. So I want you to find them online. It's servepro.com. That's SERV, servepro.com. They are the ones you want to trust to get your property back in previous condition, to get it looking the way it's supposed to. Of course, each franchise also independently owned and operated, so you'll love working with ServPro because of the hard work they're going to do for you. So if you find yourself in the need of seeing a messy situation cleaned up, I hope you'll trust ServPro today online at servepro.com. Okay, before we move on, can I give you a quick programming note here? Now, we got a great show coming up. It's Jake Fromm in a moment. It's Connor Riley in a bit. You're going to love all of that. The SEC has done something this week it doesn't typically do. That's at least interesting. We'll talk about what that perhaps means. But before anything else, can I let you know about a really fun thing that's going on, courtesy of our friends at Cercheros? You know we love Cercheros for eating at lunch or game day watch parties, tailgate parties, things like that. You've heard us talk about Cercheros before. And now a lucky winner here, courtesy of Cercheros and DawgNation, is going to get the chance to experience the delicious fresh mix that Cercheros is famous for your own ultimate game day watch party. Let me tell you more about exactly what this is going to be like. You're going to be able to get together for a big thing. It's the ultimate game day party, and the opportunity to enter for your chance to win goes through October 6th. What you could do is you could win a $200 gift card that's going to make your next game day a true, real party with freshly prepared food just for you from our friends at Cercheros. Of course, you already know the great catering options they have, the taco, the fajita bars, the platters, all of that. Well, you're going to get a $200 gift card to enjoy that, courtesy of our friends at Cercheros, if you're the winner. So here's what you need to do. You need to go to DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. That's DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. You can enter now, as you hear me speaking, all the way through October 6th. So get in there today, get your chance to win. We had a great event the other day at Cercheros. I enjoyed some delicious lunch there. I love the fresh mix that they're famous for. I love the fact that you're walking through the line. They'll grill your veggies for you. They'll do all that. In fact, you can go to a DawgNation on social, whether it be X or YouTube or Instagram. You can see more of this yourself, of me enjoying a delicious lunch there at Cercheros, but somebody else is going to get a chance to enjoy the ultimate game day party courtesy of Cercheros and a $200 gift card for you and your friends. So register for your chance to win. DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. That is DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. Okay, before we get rolling with our guests, including Connor Riley in just a moment, let's get ready to go now around the doghouse, and it's poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. So we said before, we want Alabama feeling the pressure on Saturday. We want them coming into Sanford Stadium and being reminded of the struggles the program has had on the road. And this is where we continue to think the Georgia crowd can play a huge, huge impact in all of this, to really remind the Crimson Tide that the previous games have either been neutral side or in Tuscaloosa, but this game is between the hedges, a place that Georgia has not lost since the 2019 season, nation's longest home winning streak. Just how important is having this game at home? This is what Kirby Smart said about that yesterday.
Being at home is an advantage, just as I say going on the road is hard. Going on the road last year to play the games we played, hard. Going to Tennessee a couple weeks ago was hard. Playing at home, it helps. The atmosphere helps. The crowd noise helps. Being familiar with your surroundings and all that stuff helps. But at the end of the day, you got to go play football, and it comes down to matchups. It comes down to who blocks and tackles the best, who executes and does things in the key moments of the game. So certainly glad it's at home, but we still got to play well.
which is obviously true. And Kirby Smart, while he always acknowledges the role that fans play, doesn't want to take the responsibility off himself or the players about what's going to happen between the white lines. We certainly understand that. And keep in mind, when you think about Georgia home games now, it's even more than it was when this home winning streak first started. Now you get the fireworks, you get all of the pyro and the LED show and the enhanced music in some cases, and all of the things that make this really a pretty big spectacle. Stadium ops, I would say, greatly improved for Georgia last couple of years when it comes to this sort of thing. And it certainly seems like everybody at Georgia is looking to marshal forces as much as they can to make that home field advantage as strong as it can possibly be. Smart was also asked about that yesterday. This is what he said about that.
I don't know what it's hard to what you referenced there. I mean, the toughest place to play is where the best players are. So, like, when you have really good teams, they're hard to play against. I don't know that the atmosphere alone makes it that way. I mean, I've played in some there's a point of no return, like A&M. It's really loud. I played when I coached there, when I coached at Alabama, Auburn, one of the hardest places, Tennessee, one of the hardest places. I mean, they're all hard. LSU, they're all really hard to play in, and I think ours fits in that same category of hard to play in. But it's what you're playing against that makes the difference. I don't like making it about the athletic department and what kind of atmosphere they create. The fans create the atmosphere, not the athletic department. And our fans have done a great job of giving us a competitive home field advantage that is equal to other places in the SEC.
I think everything that Smart says there is, of course, 100% true, that it's harder to play a good team on the road in a silent stadium than it would be to play a bad team in a very loud stadium. We certainly understand that. And, of course, the ultimate thing that creates the noise is the fans yelling. It's not the music or the lights or anything like that. It's the fans yelling. That's one of the reasons why we've said, hey, be ready to – and I'm going to be a total hypocrite because my voice is already pretty bad, as you know, but be ready to go out there and just put your voice to full use on Saturday. Be ready to go out there and really lay it all out there. And obviously the fans have the ultimate responsibility, 93,000 coming together to make the atmosphere everything that it can be. But we also know, and Kirby's too busy to worry about this, but if you're in the stadium, you know this, that for whatever reason, the lighting going down at the exact right time, the music kicking in at the exact right time, the fireworks perfectly mixing in with all of that, the theatrics do seem to make it better. The stadium operation part of this, the little extra dramatic flares, they do make people, I think, want to yell a little bit louder. And, when I am there in moments like this, I'm always amazed at what a spectacle this has become. It's really like you go to a concert or something like that. I mean, that's what these college football games become. They are quite a spectacle. And as Kirby said, most of the SEC teams have their own version of that. Georgia is now, I would say, equal to those. It's not, oh my gosh, wildly better than the others. It's just on par with the others, which is about as good as you can probably hope to be. But it's amazing what a spectacle that is. And I do think that if the goal is to get fans to be as loud as they can be, some of the theatrical stuff that goes on does seem to propel that a little bit more. Otherwise, there'd be no need to do it. It does seem to matter, and it seems to be working. But ultimately, the one thing beyond the white lines that Kirby Smart was willing to acknowledge is that while the pyro is pretty good and the music might help and whatever, the truth is playing the game at night, that actually probably is a little different than a day game would be, including for a reason that Smart sort of brushes up against, alludes to, without saying it out loud. I thought this was, in its own way, kind of subtly funny from Kirby Smart. One more time, Kirby on the role that fans play on Saturday.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement that it's louder at night than day. I think depending on the day and the time of the year and the temperature, it can take its toll on the fan base, just like it does the players. I mean, we're not as fast. Our GPS numbers say 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock games, they're not as fast when it's 85, 90 degrees with a humidity factor like we have around here. You end up who can survive, not who can be the fastest. And at night, you don't run into those things. I think the crowd has a little longer to get prepared for it, and they're louder. I mean, they're not as taxed. There's not as much heat. So the games I've coached in, played in, been a part of, night games are a little more rowdy.
Did you notice that there at the end when Kirby Smart says, "Oh yeah, night game, the fans have a little bit more time to get prepared for it. It makes them rowdy." I have seen how some of y'all get prepared for it when it comes to these night games. I'm going to tell you to make sure you get prepared for it carefully and responsibly, but pretty clearly for the obvious reasons. There is a much more raucous crowd for these games at night. And I'm telling you, man, I'm ready for it. We don't get many of these opportunities in life. You don't get very many home games, period. But the big special home games are just to a different level. And this is one of the things we've been looking forward to ever since this game was announced. And Saturday we get the chance to experience. So no regrets. Leave it all on the line. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game. We've already seen what was a narrow Georgia, point spread in their favor is shrinking. We're used to that taking place. I think it suggests there's going to be a good, close game. Georgia's status as a favorite is mostly propped up by home field advantage. You better make the home field advantage real. If you want to put pressure on Bama, make them remember, oh, yeah, we don't play well away from home. You better make it uncomfortable for them from the word go. And that's one of those things that I know that Georgia fans will definitely be ready to do. That's also around the Doghouse here today, poured by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. By the way, speaking of a great tailgate opportunity, how about the rich flavor, the great taste of Mercier Orchards Hard Cider as a part of your tailgate on Saturday? One of the things we're proud of is the fact that Mercier Orchards is a Georgia-grown company. The orchard stretching over a couple hundred acres up there in beautiful Blue Ridge, Georgia, North Georgia mountains. So if you're proud of your state, as our state gets ready to do battle with another state on Saturday, celebrate the great tradition of our state of things grown right here, like the apples and fruits that go in to become Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. In fact, you can go up to Blue Ridge, Georgia and see this for yourself. In fact, if we can we show this on the screen? I got a great message from a Georgia fan who, and you'll never know, including days like this when my voice is not working very well, I can barely speak, but the fact that y'all are out here listening and trying to help us out and do things for us, you will never know how much this means to me. Chuck Scoggins wrote in to say, I'm up here north of LJ and going to try out some of that Mercier Orchards Hard Cider at your recommendation. And the picture is right there at the beautiful Mercier Orchards location. So the fact that y'all would do that, you go up there and visit them in Blue Ridge, is an awesome thing. Chuck, I appreciate that. And for all of you who've given Mercier Orchards a try, Mercier Orchards Hard Cider a try, I really appreciate that. And if you can't be in Blue Ridge to experience it for yourself, don't forget, where you're shopping for your groceries or your favorite beverage store or perhaps even your favorite restaurant, you can ask for it there. And if you don't see it, I want you to encourage them to get it for you because you're going to love it. They're going to sell a lot of it. It's a win-win for both the location and for you. So the best way to do this is just to Google Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. But you can also find it online by checking out mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. Mercier is spelled M-E-R-C-I-E-R. Mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. We appreciate them being a part of Around the Doghouse here today. All right, it's Jake Fromm coming up in a moment. But for now, from Athens on everything as the Dogs get ready for the Crimson Tide, let's talk to Connor Riley here, DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let me say hello to Connor Riley. Obviously, Georgia getting ready for Alabama coming up on Saturday. And the simple point that I made, obviously from a pro-Georgia standpoint, Connor, is I think it's important to make Alabama feel like it's the team that has the pressure here. Yes, Georgia has what has not been a distinguished record against the Crimson Tide, but I think a lot of those games, a lot of the stories around those games aren't always exactly what they are made out to be for various reasons. What's a lot more, I think, concretely true is that in the Kalen DeBoer era, Alabama's had a hard time winning games away from home. Some of that even started before Nick Saban retired in terms of just not quite being the same team away from Tuscaloosa that it was inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. I think if you can make Alabama be reminded of that on Saturday, then I think this game gets a little bit more difficult, and frankly, Georgia can play a little free, a little easy, and not have to view, oh, this is a uniform that's given us trouble. I think finding a way to put the pressure on the Alabama side, to the extent that that can even be quantified, I do think that's an important key to victory for Georgia on Saturday. What say you?
Yeah, from a national standpoint, I do believe there's absolutely more pressure on Alabama. You mentioned Kalen DeBoer's record away from Bryant-Denny Stadium. I think you factor in that if Alabama loses this game, I believe they're going to have to go unbeaten after this contest, and that includes games against LSU, a Vanderbilt team that beat them last year. Yes, those games come at home. You get Oklahoma that looks to be a quality outfit once again, and you still have more road games coming up. But I just think that within the Georgia fan base, within the Georgia mindset, the history of this recent matchup weighs on Georgia just more, and it just has to. And when you're 1-6 against one school, when Kirby Smart, I believe, is like 108-19 as a college coach, like this is the compounding factor of those past losses. And yes, I believe some of those early games that Smart matched up, particularly against Nick Saban, came when Alabama had a talent advantage. I would make the argument that since the 2021 season, where Georgia and Alabama have now met 4 times over that span, Georgia has had the talent advantage in those last 4 games, and they are 1-3 in those games. So Georgia has to find a way to just win on Saturday. It doesn't need to be pretty, even though I think they're clearly the better team if you remove the logos from this. But Alabama, and that game in particular, regardless of how talented or how well Georgia is playing, has just seemed to given Georgia problems. And so in that sense, there is still, I think, a great deal of pressure on this Georgia team, even if this is a very different Georgia team than the one we saw in Tuscaloosa in 2024.
So we talk all the time about the fact that players just don't think about this stuff the same way that I do, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I remember almost every Georgia game I've ever experienced, at least in some form or fashion. I have some memory of almost every game. Players just don't chronicle and catalog these things the same way. Do you think that the average Georgia player knows about the Alabama struggles? I mean, how aware do you think the average Georgia player is of that? Because I will tell you, previous era, I think eventually Georgia players became aware of struggles against Florida, for instance. But a lot of that was because the game was always in the same place. At least I would be led to believe going to Jacksonville brought some of that top of mind. How top of mind do you think Georgia's struggles against Alabama are to the typical Georgia player?
Now, the definition of a typical Georgia player on this team is quite different, just given, I think the number is 54% of the players on this team are in their first or second year in college. And when you consider that this roster has 40 new players on it who weren't on the team last year, in that sense, the history just is not there with the bulk of this Georgia roster when it comes to Georgia, Alabama. I do think that there are veterans on this team that it does weigh more heavily for. I think of someone like Michael Morris, who, since joining the program in 2021, he's lost 5 games as a player. 3 of them have come against Alabama. I think of guys like Oscar Delp, guys that have played in that 2023 SEC championship game to a lesser extent last year. You know, you see the video there of KJ Bolden. I'm sure he's thought and seen a lot of that Ryan Williams touchdown that he was a part of last season. But for a large majority of these guys, especially the ones that are going to play on Saturday, they don't have a ton of personal history with this game. You know, Gunnar Stockton, who, yes, he's in his 4th year with this program and has been on the sidelines for those games, he has no Alabama moment to this point in time. And I wrote about this morning on DawgNation. You know, for better or worse, the Alabama games have sort of come to define Georgia quarterbacks over the years. You know, Jake Fromm, we're going to have on here in a minute, close, but just couldn't quite get over the hump, losing 2 one-score games. Stetson Bennett losing 41-24 the first 2 times he played them before finally getting over the hump in the national championship game. And then last year, like, I think that Alabama game summed up the Carson Beck experience to a T, where there were moments of brilliance, there were some really tough turnovers, and ultimately it was just a very unsatisfying ending. And so I'm very interested with Gunnar Stockton in particular. What does his experience against Alabama turn into, and what does that look like? Because, you know, coming out of the Tennessee game where he played so well, I think that this is a chance for him to author an even greater sort of story when it comes to his time as Georgia's quarterback.
I'm trying to squeeze in 2 topics before we let you go here, Connor. The first one is this. You know, I said a lot during the offseason. I had 2 slightly ambitious but also reasonable goals for Georgia. I wanted to be undefeated in September and undefeated at home. And I thought if they can accomplish those 2 things, they're well on their way to whatever the end-of-season goals are. Undefeated in September, undefeated at home. Well, they're 1 win away from being undefeated in September. I'm going to tell you right now, Connor, I think that'd be a significant accomplishment. I think that'd be a remarkable achievement to win at Tennessee, followed up with a win against Alabama. And in a college football season where it seems like we're still, as media, flailing around to find out what the narrative for this season is, I'm talking about for Georgia and the sport beyond, we don't really have a prevailing storyline yet. Boy, Georgia could go a long way towards being it if it's undefeated in September, having won at Tennessee and beaten Alabama. High stakes for Georgia because of that, right?
Absolutely. I think if Georgia gets through this month of September undefeated, something you and I both talked about and agreed about this offseason, it just gives Georgia so much more rope over the course of the season. Where last year, after that loss to Alabama early in the year, it felt like every week was sort of a grind and they had to find a way to go out there and win. And I do think that caught up and started to weigh on the team over the course of the season. So if you get through this month unbeaten, something a lot of teams did not do, Alabama already has a loss on its schedule. Clemson already has 3. It just frees you up to play so much more freely, to not have that feeling of week in, week out. Well, I don't know how much more margin of error we have over the course of the season. And so if Georgia's able to get to the end of September with a 4-0 record, wins on the road at Tennessee, a team that I think looks like a playoff team, and a win over Alabama, while people will knock Alabama if they do lose this game, that's an incredibly impressive resume. And I think it shows that this team, which is super young, still getting better, is still pretty dang talented and near the top of college football, which I think should be a very scary thought for the rest of the sport.
All right, so simple question concluded. What's the path to victory for Georgia?
I think the path to victory is they have to be able to run the ball. They fell behind early last year, in part because of turnovers, in part because Jalen Milroe looked like the greatest player in college football history in the first half of that game. And so I think running the ball keeps Alabama off the field. It keeps your defense off the field. And if you're forcing Alabama to be one-dimensional, I think that's going to help Georgia in the second half of this game. I'm not picking Georgia to win the game this week. I'm not falling for it again. I've talked to people in and around the program. There's confidence about what Georgia can do. There's a belief that I think they are the better team. I've said if you take the logos off the helmets, I think that Georgia would be the better team in this game. But just given the history of this and the way that we've seen Georgia with better, more talented teams than Alabama find ways to lose, I just can't sit here and say full-throated that I believe Georgia is going to win this game because, as we touched on at the top, for me, and as someone who's covered enough of these games, the history does seem to sort of wear on me at this point in time.
Well, Connor, we'll look forward to more coverage from you there in Athens. Obviously, plenty of that to take place here. Thanks for being here as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by ServPro. Can't wait to see you in Athens on Saturday. And, of course, plenty more along the way here, too. Appreciate your time.
Yep, and I just want to give a happy birthday shout-out to my dad. He turned 69 today.
Happy birthday indeed. That's awesome, Mr. Riley. That's great stuff. Connor, thank you very much.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So happy birthday to Connor's dad. That's great to be able to hear. And, of course, great to have Connor on the show. Really good analysis coming in from him. Of course, the analysis continues. Jake Fromm here in a moment. But prior to that, though, let's go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And, boy, I tell you, if you're thinking about an unbelievable vacation experience, one of the things I want you to think about, obviously from our friends at Royal Caribbean, that's Star of the Seas. Star of the Seas is the newest in the Icon class of ships. And what I love about it is, and this is, I've been cruising. I think I took my first cruise somewhere around early 2000s, somewhere in that, time frame. And to think that the biggest and best cruise ships that are being rolled out would be sailing out of Port Canaveral, boy, that's not something we would have necessarily thought would have been true, decades ago. But now that's indeed what the case is, because the newest Icon class ship made for Port Canaveral, drivable port for us, easy for me to get to, probably easy for you to get to too. And you can experience on these 7-night sailings just the unbelievable expanse that is Star of the Seas and all of the special things that Star of the Seas has. For instance, it has some bar and restaurant concepts that you won't find anywhere else. There's a dueling pianos bar, for instance, right in the center of the Royal Promenade, which is expanded on the ship. So if you want to hang out late and listen to the funny but entertaining show, and if you want to have something to do for the entire family, well, of course, that's exactly what Star of the Seas is all about. So let Jessica Slater book that trip for you. She's the one that I trust for all of my Royal Caribbean cruise vacation needs. You can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, before we get Jake Fromm, let's bounce through a couple of stories here real quick. And I'm always careful we don't miss anything we need to talk about. Yesterday, we probably should have talked about this. So let's hit it hard here today. We did talk about the Oklahoma-Auburn game, but more from the standpoint of what the Oklahoma defense did. It is also worth noting, though, that an Oklahoma touchdown that was allowed to stand in this game should not have counted. I want to show you the official statement from the SEC on this. We're going to probably have to put that full screen so I can read it. It says, in Saturday's Auburn-Oklahoma football game with 10:50 remaining in the second quarter, a pass was thrown to Oklahoma's number they just put number 5, resulting in a touchdown. Oklahoma, the player had participated in the previous play, which was a first down play from the 22-yard line. After the first down play was completed, Oklahoma, the player, continued towards his team's sideline, but stopped just before reaching the Oklahoma sideline. So it was basically he pretended to sub himself out, creating an illusion, and that was the trickery that'll set up the Oklahoma touchdown. Officials saying this should not have stood. Most people have correctly pointed out, okay, well, even if you admit the mistake, where does Auburn go for any kind of retribution on this? The answer to that is nowhere. The SEC also says they'll have no further statement on this, but basically, trust us, bro. We're going to have the proper punishment for the officials involved. We're just not going to tell you what it is. As I said, trust us, bro. We promise you we're going to do it, which is not going to be good enough for anybody. Here's what I'll say just real quick. I'm going to climb onto my high horse to do this. This is, I think, not just – look, if you're a left tackle, the pass rusher's coming after the quarterback, if he beats you, if you wrap your arms around him and hold him, that's obviously an infraction. I don't consider that to be immoral. The same way with, like we saw this with the Daniel Harris play against Tennessee. If you're running step for step with a guy and all of a sudden he gets past you and he's about to go for a touchdown, your only chance is I got to pass interfere. As most of us said, in a situation like that, you better pass interfere in such a way that it doesn't catch the ball because it's only a 15-yard penalty. That's an infraction. It's against the rules, but it's not necessarily immoral. There are a couple of things that happen in football that I think are immoral. Faking injuries is immoral. It's not just a breaking of the rules or even violating the spirit of the rules. It's the kind of thing that's just unbecoming of a man, to be honest with you. And football, I think, celebrates masculinity properly defined. This is the same sort of thing. This sort of trickery, this sort of, this is against the spirit of competition. And so this is the sort of rule infraction that I would say is different than most other rule infractions. So now that I say that, I'm going to hop down and get off my high horse here and say this is the kind of thing that the SEC is right to want to come down hard on, because this to me is a little different than the typical rule infraction would be. Let me also mention this. Did you see that I guess there are reports coming out of Gainesville that DJ Lagway is once again wearing a walking boot? Now, he seems to be in and out of a walking boot every other week and has been now for years. Staying healthy has been a hard thing for Lagway to do. It does leave you wondering, though, given the fact that Billy Napier's status is uncertain. We are now just past the magical 4-game number. I'm not saying this is going to happen. You at least have to wonder. Is Lagway done? Is he going to play again this year for a Florida team in which is struggling? He himself is struggling. If I had to guess, my guess is he probably does play. But it's at least fair to wonder, given the very murky situation in Florida right now, that when Lagway has been on the field, he hasn't been able to do much to help. I had one more story I was going to do, but the truth is we'll hit that with Jake. Let me instead make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean and get ready to bring on here, of course, the terrific former Georgia quarterback. We're always happy for our chance to talk to him. How about Jake Fromm here today, here as a part of DawgNation Daily with Alabama looming on Saturday. Jake, appreciate your time. Thanks for helping us preview all of that.
Yeah, always glad to be here, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Before we jump into the Alabama thing, the story I was going to hit with the audience, but ran out of time. So tonight we're going to get the 2026 schedule released for Georgia, and we've already found out permanent opponents for Georgia certainly looks like going to be Auburn, Florida. We would have already guessed that, and South Carolina as a permanent opponent instead of like a Tennessee, Kentucky, some of the teams that have been kicked around there. It's also only going to be for 4 years. Any thought from you? I mean, to me, it's about, as long as you're playing Auburn and Florida, the third permanent opponent I think is fairly inconsequential. I do think this schedule released tonight is going to be interesting because it's going to look a lot different than previous Georgia schedules have. They're going to be traveling to faraway places they've either never been before or don't go very much. So I think that's going to be interesting. But as far as the permanent opponents go that we believe is going to be Florida, Auburn, South Carolina, any thought from you on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to kind of miss that Tennessee game a little bit, but I think you're exactly right. The big hitters, to me, have to be Florida and then Auburn. Kentucky, I guess, could have been in there as well. But yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with South Carolina. I think that's a good one. It makes a lot of sense, makes a lot of geographical sense as well. There are a couple games I guess you're going to miss that aren't always there. Like you have Alabama and LSU. I don't think that they will be um, uh, playing every single year, kind of with this new schedule. And then you have LSU in Florida that will be missed out as well. So just a couple
Yeah.
kind of big hitter games that you're just so used to seeing that will be missed. And I think Florida Tennessee is another good rivalry that gets missed as well. So, but those are just kind of my quick thoughts there on the situation. But I think all in all, they did a pretty solid job. I think you can always nitpick about this and that, but given the scope of all these different teams and schedules, I think they did a pretty good job. And I think all Georgia fans are looking to see Georgia go to Texas A&M and play there at Kyle Field.
So I want to talk about home field advantage for Georgia against Alabama. You played in the famous game against Notre Dame, which was the first game with the LED lights. Now it's the fireworks and the pyro to go along with that. It's a real spectacle. And as someone who loves a good spectacle, I say that very complimentary. How much better does the team play when the crowd is loud? And how much did, in that particular game, when you had all of the extra stuff that was prodding along the crowd, how much do you think that helped the crowd get louder in that game that you were a part of against Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think there's an energy there. I think there's a pressure to perform there as well. I felt it a ton in that game, hosting Notre Dame. Of like, hey man, this is our home field, this is our home turf. Everybody is there going to be at this game, and man, I whatever it took, I wanted to come out with a win in that game. Thank God we did, and there was just a lot of pressure to perform. And night games at Sanford are just an awesome spectacle. So glad that we get to have that here in this Alabama game coming up. I think it's just going to be a rockin' place. I think the first two games, Kirby kind of talking about the fan attendance
Yeah.
and maybe not quite as into the game. I think it's just all being led up to this game, and I'm expecting just an unbelievable atmosphere this game.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, like you said, there was the issue with who was and wasn't there for the full game against Marshall, Austin Peay, whatever else. Obviously, Austin Peay was the rain. But the truth is, this is fairly common across college football all the way around, that the big games just feel different. And everybody's like, well, why can't you just make every game feel like the big game? I don't know. Life is just what it is. That's just what reality is. And the big games just feel different. And in a given season, you only get a small handful of those. And for me, it's almost more important than the championships. Obviously, you want to see your team win championships. But really, the championship is just a way to make the games feel bigger. The memories that you have are the moments that happen around these really big games. And yeah, I don't care what the Marshall atmosphere was like or who was or wasn't there. There is no doubt that, I mean, the sense that I get from the Georgia fans I've talked to, it's been at a fever pitch now, even going back to last week. People, I think, Jake, are very ready for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready for it. I'm excited about it. It's going to be awesome just to see it, just to be there. Night game at Sanford, like I mentioned. I mean, there's just so many things going on with this game. It's the first time Alabama has played in Sanford since Kirby's been the head coach. I mean, there's so many different storylines to go on with this one. And the biggest storyline of all is, what is this Alabama football team, right?
Yeah.
You just have no idea how good they are. They lost that opening game to Florida State. And man, they've just absolutely crushed it since then. What is this team? What are we going to expect? The Georgia team, we know they're good. They kind of got away with the game on the road at Tennessee. You can learn a lot from almost losing. I mean, there's just so many questions. And so I think that's what kind of brings the excitement here in this game in an early kind of section in the season.
Let me try to squeeze in two more topics with you. You mentioned how good is Alabama. I think a lot of folks are left to wonder, well, how good is Ty Simpson? Kirby Smart, when he spoke to reporters yesterday, very complimentary of Simpson. Admittedly did not have a great game against Florida State. Nobody from Alabama did, but has really been red hot kind of since then. This is also a guy that waited his turn for a long time to finally be the Alabama starting quarterback. Jake, as a quarterback yourself, what's the sense that you get of Ty Simpson right now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities with Ty and Gunner, and like you said, there's experience there, but maybe not playing experience because these guys have waited their turn. This is their opportunity. He didn't necessarily play great in that opening game, nerves, whatever, team not being ready. You have no idea, but ever since that game, I mean, this guy has played perfection. Now, I haven't dove into the film and watched what he does well and what he doesn't do well. I'm just kind of following the game, following the numbers, highlights here and there. I mean, this guy is crushing it. So I'm excited to see what this guy is all about and what Kalen DeBoer can scheme up in this game, especially after watching the Tennessee film. There's a lot of holes, a lot of gaps. Defense didn't have the greatest day. So, I mean, this guy could have a good day, and he could really scare the Georgia defense here and make it a long night. So I think this team, the Alabama team, kind of is going to live and die by their quarterback play. And I'm just excited to see how good this young man is.
I want to ask you one more question before we let you go. Let me remind folks prior to that, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with Jake Fromm. And, of course, everybody getting ready for the big one coming up on Saturday. If you're lucky enough to be in Athens, you know what your job is. But also, we need the good vibes from everybody who's gathering with family and friends for a game like this. And, of course, Kroger, a great way to get stocked up, everything you need on that. And a great way to enjoy the football weekend coming up. Because, by the way, we haven't done a ton of this yet. Have you seen the football schedule for this weekend? My goodness, what a great college football weekend it is. Plus, it's Ryder Cup. We love that. So you got a lot of sports to watch on TV here coming up, which means you want time to do it. Kroger Boost, the membership opportunity, a great way to get more time back for the things you love. You can get free grocery delivery, free pickup. Also, as you're schlepping around town, the way it seems like I always am, how about twice the fuel points on the things you're already buying at your local Kroger? Kroger.com/boost for more on that. That's Kroger.com/boost for more on that. All right, Jake, final question. Admittedly, it's probably impossible to answer, but it ties in, I think, everything we've discussed throughout the show here today. Georgia has not beaten Alabama with regularity. Alabama has not won road games recently. Both of those are big, almost like shadows hanging over both teams. Obviously, both teams are hungry to end those trends as it relates to that. It's a big storyline, but there's also the risk of not making it too big. In the case of Georgia in particular, you know, games against Alabama in sometimes heartbreaking fashion have just gone the other way. If you're Georgia, how do you keep that from being too big of a factor in your mindset getting ready for this one on Saturday night?
Well, I think it starts with Kirby. Having the bye week, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, could help, could not help, because there's just more time to think about this game. They were able to get away this weekend, kind of reset, get back into the fold of the season, get guys healthy. So I think that is a plus and a positive. But it starts with Kirby and getting these guys to focus on what really matters. And that is in that building, scheme, game plan, prep, getting your body right, and leave all the outside noise and mess to people like us. And I think the home field advantage in this game will be a huge factor, man. I'm a believer in this Georgia fan base and what they're able to do when the right time and when it's needed. So I think that place will be rocking. I think that'll be playing a huge factor in this game. And both teams will have their wrinkles because they're coming off byes. There'll be blows back and forth. This game always has blows back and forth. This team for a couple drives, this team for a couple drives. So this is going to be a 4-quarter game. Don't expect it to be anything less than that. It's going to be a 4-quarter game, and it's going to be a good one.
Jake, awesome stuff. Appreciate you as always. Enjoy the upcoming weekend. Let's both together hope that Georgia gets the big win against Alabama. We can come back and talk about a 4-0 undefeated Georgia.
That's right.
Getting out of the first month of the season unblemished. Boy, that's a fun conversation. Hope you and I get a chance to have that again next week.
Yeah, look forward to it. Talk about it next week, Brandon. Thank you.
Good stuff there, Jake Fromm, Kroger Fresh Take. Let me also mention this as I figure out which camera to look into. Yeah, really good stuff, Jake Fromm. You know, we start that conversation by talking about, hey, 3 permanent opponents, and you know, you're going to be finding more about the 2026 schedule tonight. Keep in mind, the Dog Nation is going to be live to react to the SEC's release of the 2026 schedule. By now, we know the permanent opponents. As Jake said, we know which of the rivalries in the SEC are going to go away on an annual basis, and that's significant. But I think the thing tonight, and I'm going to have to beg your pardon, I will not be a part of that here this evening, but I think the thing tonight that Georgia fans need to be on guard for, as I alluded to with Jake, y'all, this 2026 schedule for Georgia is likely to be very different. And if you're the Georgia fan that likes to travel to games, things like that, after this year when Georgia has really not gone, you know, its road games are all relatively close by. Knoxville, Auburn, among the closest places in the SEC to Athens. Next year, there's a very good chance that it might not be that way. Now, some of these games will be at home, but consider these as possible road games. Georgia doesn't play LSU very much. We think that LSU might come on the schedule. Is that a home game, or does Georgia go back to Baton Rouge for the first time since 2018? Do they finally go to College Station against Texas A&M? That's obviously the weird anomaly of what's been going on with SEC schedules dating back to the Aggies' entrance to the SEC in 2012. Do we see them pop on? Is Georgia finally going to College Station? You have to assume they probably will, but maybe the SEC will just keep the joke alive and keep finding a way not to send Georgia to College Station. There's a chance that Georgia could go to Oklahoma. There's a chance Oklahoma, of course, could come here. Missouri could cycle back on. In other words, the SEC teams that are the farthest away, Arkansas, you got to add them into this too. Georgia could be traveling to some of those places next year. And just teams that Georgia doesn't play very much, you would be led to believe that next year they're likely to play them a lot more. Also, keep in mind that when you go from a temporary scheduling model to a permanent scheduling model, you got to do some funny things to make that happen. You'll remember when the SEC expanded before, Georgia ended up going to Auburn in back-to-back years. Do not discount as a possibility that somebody somewhere is playing at the same place 2 years in a row. We would certainly pound our fist and say, not Georgia, not this time, but we'll see. Most of us are on guard for Georgia to get it stuck to them when it comes to a scheduling, misfortune, as much as anybody. We'll see if that does indeed take place tonight. DawgNation going to have live coverage for you on that. Also, before we go, let me remind you about our friends at Circle K. If you're getting ready to drive to Athens, some of you come from a long way away, it means you have to sort of stop for those refresh breaks. Well, Circle K is going to give you a chance to do that. And by the way, that's also, as you're going around town, you need to run some errands, some things like that. Anytime you want to pop into Circle K, you can get the pregame snack you need or just that delicious drink. How about the Circle K Polar Pops? Right now, the large fountain drinks, that's what they call them, you can get those for under $1. And by the way, if you can get anything these days for under $1, you need to jump on and do that, especially a large fountain drink, the Circle K Polar Pop. Of course, you need to do that. They've also got daily deals on coffee, energy drinks, and so much more. Plus, they've got 400 locations all around Georgia as well, and hundreds more across the Southeast. So wherever you're going, Circle K can keep you fueled up, literally and figuratively, for yourself, your vehicle, everything else. Circle K is fast, convenient, and always there when DawgNation needs it most. We love our friends at Circle K. All right, as we get ready to go, yesterday for our Golden Shoe, we gave you the tremendous performance of Jordan Davis in the NFL, the block, kick, the scoop and score. Our guy Athens Forever on X shares this with us. Already a beautiful artist rendition of this, kind of a painting of Jordan Davis rumbling and bumbling and stumbling there. He says, hang in the Louvre. Yeah, no doubt about that. Hashtag Golden Shoe indeed. Kirby's ring finger getting that. Amazing rendition of the Jordan Davis. And honestly, awesome to really celebrate a great former Dawg continuing to do terrific things there in the NFL. Golden Shoe to both Jordan Davis and our guy Athens Forever, known as Kirby's ring finger, on that. How about those lousy, stinking Gators? Long time since they've beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. About 1,781 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. Back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. So I mentioned this to our audience before the show began. Some of y'all know got a little bit going on these days. Don't exactly know what it is, but boy, it doesn't seem to be going away. So going to step up and have some help with our R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. I'm going to pass the baton over to both Kaylee Manziel and Cody Chaffins. You love them. They're here producing us for us today, and they are also going to do the cool down. Now, this is unplanned, unprepared. Do I have the ability to, can I talk to y'all real quick? Do I have that ability here before y'all take over? Can we do a clean handoff on that?
Yeah.
And Kaylee, it's actually you that I want to speak to.
Oh.
Look, I think that for the most part, people know this, that we don't really do the TMZ stuff around here. There are clicks to be had from who's dating whom. I am typically happy to give those clicks to somebody else. Last year when you know who was dating, you know who, I don't think we ever mentioned that on the show one time. That's just not what we do. I will ask you before I give up the microphone, let y'all take the cool down and read the comments. What do you think about, I guess, I believe we call this a hard launch, Lane Kiffin's daughter dating Whitweeks out of the Magnolia Bowl on Saturday, star linebacker for LSU dating Lane's daughter. What do we think about that, Kaylee?
It's funny that you asked this because I talked to Cody before the show, and I was like, do you think he's going to talk about the Landry Kiffin Whitweeks stuff? He's like, maybe. And so I'm so glad that you deferred this question to me because the timing of this is impeccable, right? And I feel like maybe Lane Kiffin is probably the only girl dad that would have ever been okay with this hard launch releasing before the game. It just adds an extra layer to what was already going to be a pretty interesting game to begin with. Could I have probably seen it wait a week? Yeah, that feels right. But I mean, honestly, go her for not caring and just releasing it when she wanted to. And good for Lane for being a good sport about it, because I know if it were my dad, I would have definitely gotten grounded for the rest of my life for dropping that information when she did. So good for her for having the confidence to do it. Good for Lane for not caring. But I mean, oh my gosh, you want to just talk about giving people a reason to talk? That's the one.
Well, it certainly seems like that's maybe what all this is designed to do. So I'm sure the happy couple will be very happy indeed. All right. So thanks for doing that, Kaylee. I know you'd be great on that. And thank you for allowing me not to have to talk about it much longer than that. So I'm going to give it over to you guys. Thanks for doing the cool down for us here today. Really appreciate that. Y'all are both awesome. And so with that, we'll let you take it.
Okay, so I don't think that we're going to be able to see Cody. That's correct, right?
No, I'm just a voice off to the side.
Okay, so we did want to open up the conversation, and we wanted to get people involved in this as well. With the schedules releasing tonight, me and Connor will do the breaking news segment for it, but we did put in some predictions earlier today for what we think the schedule might look like outside of the permanent 3 opponents, and maybe we'll do an accountability check on this later. At least for me, I think that they're going to go to Texas A&M, and as a result, the SEC is going to say, you're welcome. You can have Oklahoma at home since you have to make the trip to Kyle Field. I think that they will play at LSU and then have Vandy at home as another you're welcome from the SEC. I think they'll also host Arkansas at home and then go on the road to Missouri. The only thing I could see flipped is maybe those 2 games where they have Missouri come play at home and they go to Arkansas. But either way, because it's a Kirby Smart-led Georgia team, they're going to find a way to make it really difficult for the travel schedule while also giving them some easy games as a way of balancing out that difficult schedule. But it's going to be tough for fans, and I hate that. But I liked the permanent 3 opponents that we got. But, yeah, I could definitely see the SEC making it very difficult for Georgia fans to travel anywhere. Cody?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the team. So, obviously, the last couple of years, Georgia's gotten plenty of Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Ole Miss 3 years in a row now, so you're not going to see them. Alabama, I think that you don't do. I think you just have these obvious teams who Georgia has not played for the last couple of years. So LSU, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt we hadn't seen in a while, Arkansas, like you said, Texas A&M, and then, of course, South Carolina gets on there as one of the permanent but only 4-year opponents, and then Missouri. So you're filled out with your 9. So, yeah, the question is, I think they'll just go with those teams you hadn't played in a while. Then the question becomes the road trips. I think Dog fans would always prefer to go to Vandy. We hadn't been up there in a little bit, so, that's a DawgNation invasion kind of site. We would always love to. LSU, and then the Texas A&M trip is the question, right? Do we finally get to go to College Station? Is there a DawgNation invasion? Could we troll those people at yell practice the night before? Like, could we figure out a way to have a DawgNation event outside there and get after those people? That would be fun. But it does look like for this year being so many drivable games, it will be definitely a different schedule. The other thing to keep in mind, the Florida game next year is in Atlanta. So it'll go to Atlanta next year and then Tampa in 2027. So it makes it less travel if you're not having to go to Jacksonville for Georgia just to go an hour down the road. So maybe those longer trips to LSU, to Texas A&M are in order.
I know. I hope, part of me hopes that they do get Texas A&M on the schedule just because I would like to make that trip. But yeah, definitely when it comes out tonight. I think DawgNation did a study this year that out of every team in the SEC, like combined miles total, Georgia had the shortest drive of anywhere. So of course that's just all has to balance itself back out. We did notice earlier when we were looking through some of the comments that someone asked for the recruiting visitors list for this upcoming game because, I mean, obviously this is one of Georgia's biggest home games of the season. So they are going to host a lot of recruits. We don't have that list as of right now, but myself and Jeff Sintel, we do Before the Hedges every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. And one of the things that we will talk about tomorrow night is the visitors list. It's just one of those games that even if these big 5-star visitors aren't necessarily interested in Georgia specifically, they will come to this game just to watch it and be a part of it with the opponent and the atmosphere. So we'll have more on that tomorrow.
Yeah, I was looking at the comments. Alan Hampton says, what's an easy SEC game? And I do feel like you get Kentucky and Mississippi State this year. But, I mean, with Vandy, I think Georgia's been lucky not to play Vandy the last couple of years. You got to feel good about that. Arkansas next year. The thing I was interested in is looking at all of those potential teams you play next year and who could have new coaches. Florida definitely could have a new coach next year. Arkansas can easily have a new coach next year. The teams we had thought maybe, Oklahoma, Brent Venables seemed like he was on the hot seat. Now it seems like he's not. But then you wonder about like LSU, if things don't go the way they want for Brian Kelly, could that change things? So interesting. You could have a few teams with new coaches next season as well.
And so I believe it's Savannah Bryan on DawgNation.com asking about the specifics of it. We're just going to know who the opponents are going to be and where they're going to play. They will not release the specific dates. I believe in the email that we got from the SEC, that was our understanding of it. So it may not turn out to be that way. It was really oddly worded, but it makes it look like we're going to know who the opponents are. We're going to know where they're playing. We won't know the schedule just yet, though.
Yeah, so you don't need to get on your Delta app tonight and get any of those scheduled for next year. But knowing the home and away is at least helpful. But everybody's got to figure out how they're going to drop these non-conference games because everybody had booked out a 12-game schedule with an 8-conference game schedule. So everybody's going to have to figure out. There's going to be some shuffling there, so we won't get the dates just yet.
Mark on YouTube said, sorry for the misspelling of my name. It's okay. I will answer to anything remotely close. Who do you think goes for the most yards against Bama? Ooh, that's tough. I feel like right now the front runner has to kind of be Dwight Phillips Jr. just because he has been the most explosive back, but feels like we're still waiting for Nate Frazier to have that breakout game. I agree with Connor that one of the most important parts of this game and the keys to victory for Georgia is going to be able to establish some of that run game really early because that was essentially the thing that was completely eliminated from last year's game just because Alabama got up so much. So I really hope it's one of the running backs. I would love to see it be Nate Frazier just because we've been waiting on that big performance, but I would probably say that Dwight Phillips Jr. is the front runner for that right now.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, that's the question, right? Like, who has been the best running back? And it's really kind of your preference. I think some people like Nate Frazier. I really like Nate Frazier that we saw in overtime. Like, I would love to see more of those. Those feel like the Nate Frazier runs we should be seeing more, and we have not seen enough of. And I don't know if it was just a scheme thing or the Micah Morris switching sides or what sprung him on that one, but he seemed more motivated and pumped up for that than some of the runs we've seen. I would love for it to be Nate Frazier. I think it's one of those where you're going to get, if you can get 3 guys with 50 to 60 yards, that sounds good. And then, get 15 and 2 touchdowns from McCray punching it in. You could do that there, but there's not been one guy who has separated himself in that room by far.
Yeah, I do think the biggest thing about the running backs, though, is through these first 3 games, now we kind of understand more of the role of each running back. Nate Frazier, of course, still running back 1. Peanut's just kind of, when they need to use him, we can see Josh McCray as the goal or the really short yardage right at the goal line types of situations. And then Chauncey Bowens has also gotten into the mix. And through the first 2 games, was not impressed with Chauncey Bowens. And then I feel like really we've seen him come to life too, or at least in that first game was not impressed. So now we kind of understand the role of each running back. I believe it was Jay Shipes that had asked who the Texas 3 permanents are. Let's see. I can pull up this for you guys. Texas got Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. That feels
out to me was Auburn and Vandy. And I'm like, I can't ever think of one time they've ever, like, one of their matchups that I ever remember. Like, that's a game I'm not watching. But I guess you just had to fill that out, and you figured it's not as far of a drive for Auburn and Vandy. But, yeah, that one kind of strange.
Somebody wanted to ask you, Cody, specifically. This is Jonathan Aaron on YouTube. In your opinion, who has a hotter seat, Gundy or Billy?
Billy is on fire right now. Gundy has been there longer and has a little bit more, room. Billy, it's going to be time here in a minute.
And then somebody also did ask why two people have to fill in for Brandon. Well, that is because we are the two producing the show, so we have to be in here clicking the buttons and also talking. So it's a lot more difficult than it seems.
Brandon didn't want to hurt my feelings by saying he preferred Kaylee to do it by herself, so he just let me do it. So I appreciate that.
All right, and we'll check out some comments on DawgNation.com. And then, of course, again, we'll do the breaking news show tonight.
UGA Marine says Oklahoma and Ole Miss makes 0 sense. They've played one time in history. So that's the thing. And the thing about this, with it only being 4 years, it could almost change again. And, like, the other part is, who knows what happens in 2 years in college football? Like, how crazy has, are we changing conferences again? Are we going more super conference? Are we adding teams? What's going to happen in college football over the next 2 years? That could make all of the, year 3 and 4 of this schedule just moot because it'll all have changed. So that's the other part I'm keeping in mind tonight is like, yes, but like we used to get all these, we've scheduled a home and home with so-and-so in 2033 and 2034. And it's like, dude, we are never going to get to these games because things are changing so rapidly. And I just don't see it calming down at any point.
I want to go back to what we were talking about with Billy Napier and Gundy. And honestly, the pressure is really, I wouldn't even say on Napier now, but the University of Florida, because they had to earlier this season double down and say, hey, we're sticking with Billy as the guy because I think that they thought there was better things ahead. And now it looks like, oh my gosh, I told Cody that DJ Lagway is so bad at this point that it's not even like fun to watch. It's not even comical. It's really just sad. But because Florida went out of their way to make that statement early on, and now it seems like the trajectory of the program is only getting worse and worse. Like, that's just such a bad look to begin with. It kind of reminds me of the Dabo situation, where I don't think that Dabo would be in that big of the spotlight or have that much pressure if he wouldn't have went in a press conference 2 weeks ago and said, well, I'll just go win games elsewhere. If you're tired of winning, I'll go do it somewhere else. So only adding pressure to yourself by making stupid mistakes, things that can be avoided. So kind of view those things to be in the same light.
Yeah, I think so. Mark on YouTube says Cody and Kaylee with double E's. It could be CODEE, I guess, if we wanted to host a show together at one point. So we need to get our boy Colby Young, that's just one E as well, going. He was unstoppable last year against Bama. Always plays with great against the highest competition. I think back to the final play where Carson threw it up for him in the corner. He needed to play cornerback on that play. He needed to play defense and could not. But walking off the field, this is something Kaylee and I will talk about on the pregame on Saturday. Walking off the field, Colby Young was in tears against Alabama last year. And part of it's because I think he hadn't played in a game of that magnitude, and that, and then of course he was right there at the end with the chance to make a play and could not make the play. But I would be interested. I was kind of hoping they would send him out to the press conference yesterday or today just to hear from him about that, because again, he was in tears coming out. So I'm interested to know how motivated he is. And I didn't get a chance to ask Kirby, but I am curious, like, how do you harness that? I don't know. He's such a great kind of sports psychologist anyway at getting these guys motivated. But how do you use that feeling walking off the field? Because it's a lot of different players too. But how do you use that and get that to motivate the guys on Saturday?
I thought that Brandon asked Connor a really good question about if the newer players on the team understand the magnitude of the history of Georgia and Bama in recent years, and he pointed to a lot of the veterans on this team. And I think that conversation could also extend to Colby Young based on what you said. Even though he hasn't been with the program that long, just the reaction that we saw from him last year after the game, and knowing that he could have ultimately made the difference. Like, even though he transferred in and also missed so many games last year, that's one of the newer players that you could say really does understand it. And I could see Colby Young trying to get that message across to some of the younger receivers in the room as well.
And Kirby has said how much of a leader he is. UGA Marine says, how about Fran Brown to Florida? Could that be the
I don't know about
the
that.
rivalry would be rough because Kirby and he are still, his kids are friends. They're boys. That would be interesting. SEM Dog also talking about he thinks they're going to make Georgia have the hardest schedule. I think we all agree.
Yeah,
that is
100%.
going to happen. They're going to figure out the way to make it the hardest on Georgia, and partly because everybody watches Georgia games. You look at the numbers last week from the Tennessee game. You look at the numbers last year. The highest watched games are Georgia games right now. They want to put Georgia in these positions to play these big Saturday night 7:30 kicks because it's good for the SEC, even though it's tougher on Georgia.
Well, the problem with a job like Florida is now it's such an undesirable job. I feel like Auburn can also be in that category now of these programs that was once like viewed as a really big stop. Like you don't want to go there because you saw what Florida did to Dan Mullen. You see what's happening to Billy Napier as we speak. Like nobody wants that pressure on them because with the expanded playoff now, the opportunity for programs like this to make the playoff seems like it should be bigger, but in not making it, the pressure just becomes more and more, and that we've seen that destroy coaches and teams. And so, I mean, they would have to go out and get somebody, but I don't know many coaches who would leave the positions they're in now to go to somewhere where you saw what they did the last two coaches, and these people want to win more than anything. So it's kind of unfair from the start for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and Kirby, because he waited for the right moment in his career, I think that's the advice that he gives to people, whether it's Dan Lanning going to land his job or whether it is Fran Brown just needed to get that first job to get the second one, but he'll be giving out advice. Glenn Schumann, make it the right move because you can go somewhere and you can end up used up in 2 years and then you're a bad product. Like who wants to hire Billy Napier now? Because you walked into that situation because you wanted that job, but now you're toxic. And so he's going to go somewhere and be a coordinator or a position coach after this, and he won't be a head coach again. You've used that up, so you got to find the right moment to pounce.
And Elite GB says Dog fans will show out Saturday. I mean, this is honestly probably the game I've been most excited for to attend as just a part of this job since I've been doing this because Tennessee was a big one at home last year, but I've always known since they released this and we were going to have Alabama here that like just the overall day, like it's just going to feel different. The energy is going to be different. I'm not concerned about fan turnout whatsoever. If anything, I just feel bad for the fans that couldn't get a ticket because it cost an arm and a leg. But having Alabama this early when it's still that both teams and who they are and what they can do is up in the air, like it's going to be insane on Saturday. And I'm so excited.
It's going to be fun. Dennis Wilson says Georgia not using Colby Wright on YouTube. That's interesting. I do wonder, like, when is it going to be the moment for Noah Thomas? Because I feel like he has not had a breakout moment so far this year. And Jeff Sentell told me off season he was going to light it up. So waiting on that moment, and then also kind of waiting to see, what we get out of Colby Young. Yeah, we have not seen like the jump ball in the end zone, which I thought like when we had, Lawson Lucky and Colby Young and Noah Thomas all out there, I thought that would be the red zone thing that Georgia would do. And Georgia obviously struggled in the red zone against Tennessee, but we're not seeing that corner fade ball, just throw it up and see if a guy can make a play. I'm interested to see when or if that comes out. Maybe it's this week.
Yeah, and maybe Noah Thomas came in at a disadvantage because him and Colby Young essentially have the same role, and it just feels like Colby is probably more up to speed. I think at this point in the season, we would not have anticipated how big of a role London Humphreys would have, but I think that speaks to the connection probably between him and Gunnar Stockton. I could see them being very like similar in terms of personality, getting along off the field. That's his guy. He wants to get the ball to him, and even though he had some early mistakes, like he was such a big part of the victory against Tennessee. So I don't think that we really thought that London Humphreys would be as important as he has been this far.
No, 2 touchdowns so far this year. It's the nice guy club.
It's the nice guy club.
Everybody says about both of those guys. He's the nicest guy. He's the nicest guy. I will say, the more I hear from Zachariah Branch, the more I like him. The more I see him play, the more I like him. He is a rising on my radar. And that's been since he's been at Georgia. I thought I liked him in the spring. I liked him even more hearing from him yesterday. I'm sure Brandon will have some of that. We had some of that sound with him. You can check it out on our DawgNation YouTube page, or Mike and I talked about it on the beat last night, talking about Zachariah Branch. And one of the things he talked about is his attention to detail and how He wants to block on every play, and I appreciate all of those sentiments from him. And that's the one thing Kirby said about him since he got there is he's a hard worker.
And this hasn't been brought up, but I definitely wanted to mention it today. And Cody, you could speak to this too because you were there yesterday. If you have some extra time today or at any point this week, go to our DawgNation YouTube page under videos. I mean, the press conferences were great to begin with because it's UGA-Alabama week. I thought that Brett Thorson maybe had one of the best pressers of the entire year, and not just because he has the coolest voice in the world, but he just feels like the most mature, also 35 years old. You could just sit down and have a beer with him, and the way he talks about the teams and their experiences, I could have listened to him speak all day.
I had somebody text me yesterday, and they were like, he seems like a guy you want to go have a beer with. And Kaylee, I think part of the reason you like him so much, he's like your age. He's 20, he is 25 because he got to Georgia. He was already old, but he just seems like a mature, cool dude to hang out with. He's definitely not a kid. So yeah, hearing him talk, and that's the one thing, Georgia's sending out these special team guys to press conferences will drive some of us nuts, but Brett, he still has a great idea. Same with having Rodrigo Blankenship on our postgame show. These guys know ball. They're still in the same locker room. Rodrigo Blankenship has played in the NFL. What a great, incredible perspective he's going to have. So I think sometimes we see, what do you know? You're just a punter. But these guys are in the locker room. They know the vibe of the team, and they actually have eyes on more of that stuff than anybody because they're not called upon except a few times a game.
And thank you, DT, on DawgNation.com for reminding us that it is Zachariah, not Zach. That was the first thing that he let us know yesterday in the press conference, that he likes Zachariah Branch, not Zach Branch. So when you're tweeting on Saturday, I love reading y'all's tweets, by the way. DawgNation is the most hilarious fan base when it comes to just the game tweets. It is Zachariah, not Zach.
Brodo says he's got an Australian accent for ya. We got to get our man Jack Leo. His dad is Australian. Jack now was working with us for a long time, working for the AJC, doing AJC varsity stuff. Jack's got a great Australian accent.
Yeah, Lance D on YouTube saying that he's surprised that Rodrigo has not gotten the call from the Falcons yet. I've been saying this. I have been saying this to every person that is a Falcons fan, that I would love to see Rodrigo on the Falcons.
After last week, I think Falcons called Jake. I think he's a quarterback too after last week, or at least get somebody to call some different plays for old Michael Penny. We don't want to go into a Falcons show here, but yeah, there's plenty to talk about with the Falcons.
Cody called me old.
You are old. You're old now.
I'm older. But
kickers can be a hero 0 with one kick. Elite GB, that is such the case.
We saw that Sunday in the NFL. We were also talking about this too, that this could be another big special teams battle. Because I don't think I've seen that many blocked field goals that changed the course of the game on Sunday. And if that foreshadows anything about some of the bigger games that we're going to see this week, not just Georgia and Alabama, Oregon and Penn State. I cannot wait for Penn State to be exposed. But it really does matter so much more than we think. And knowing that Georgia has consistent special teams players in their kickers and punters, that gives you a lot of security going into Saturday.
Yeah, that's the one. You can win that part of the game. It's going to put you ahead. I think back to the 2022 1-versus-1 game. Great punt by Brett Thorson, changing the course of that game, setting up points to be scored on defense. Who do you think is going to have the first touchdown, Gunner or Branch? Thanks, Jonathan Aaron on YouTube. Ooh, I will say Gunner. I can see him running the ball in there early in this game.
I have not made a single touchdown prediction or guessed one right this season, so I'm not qualified to answer this. I'll just fade Cody and say Zach Branch.
Zachariah.
Branch. Sorry, I got to get in the habit of it too.
It's so much easier, Zach. I always feel bad if I get the guy's name wrong. That's the one thing that some of these guys in their third year will come out and say, oh, yeah, by the way, I want to be called this. And you want to get it right because it's important. It's people's names. I got shoes older than Kaylee, says Marshall Fleming. That's the one thing about getting older that I've noticed. I have clothes now that are very, very, whether it's my high school football shirt, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's 22 years old now. The clothes get very old very fast.
Penn State is physical. They're legit. I have when it comes to Penn State, when it comes to James Franklin, I just want to be proved wrong before I hop on that train, because our friend Connor Riley has bought in on Penn State as his potential national champion, as the number 1 seed in the playoffs, and I just cannot fall for that propaganda because it's James Franklin at the end of the day. And like I said, maybe they prove me wrong against Oregon, but Oregon is dominating teams right now. So we're going to know a lot more about both of those programs on Saturday, but I can't buy into that before I see a James Franklin Penn State team prove me wrong.
Johnny Prescott wants to know when you're showing up on Feinbaum. You think Mike could give you a hookup? You'd be on there this week. He's in town.
Of course I would be honored to be on Paul Feinbaum. I wouldn't pass up that opportunity, but I'm also just not going to go out of my way to be super persistent about it. I think when the time comes and he feels like I'm ready, then it'll be my time. But I love being in our DawgNation studio and talking here. So maybe one day, but I'm not pushing for that until the moment happens, and everything else leads to that.
Bama boy heading out. We appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all having us hang in here for Brandon today. Brandon trying to save that voice a little bit, which I get. It's not an easy time of year for BA. Yeah, BA's still on. Who calls the Dawgs at the game? Well, you've already hit Herschel this year. We had Hot Rod do it. I'm trying to think who else did it that I missed. You got to start now. You got to start looking at the bye weeks in the NFL. We're not to the bye weeks yet in the NFL, so that hurts your chances there. You got to get a legend. I think Richard Seymour was there last week. Mm-hmm. He's got a kid on the team as well. It'll be interesting. I don't know who you have. Jake. How about Jake? He's around, right? Jake Fromm. Send him out there. He was on the sideline a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Maybe Jake could call the Dawgs for everybody. Going to be Roquan, says Josh. Has they already said that? Maybe.
Okay, there is something I would love to address because I have been waiting on this comment for forever. This comes from, let me get this right, Baggins and Friends on YouTube, and it says Connor and Kaylee have this brother-sister type rivalry. Yes. Thank you. For a really long time, I think people assumed that it was something else that tied us together, but I have always said that Connor is like the older brother that I have never had because I am the oldest of mostly girls. So no, we are definitely more like a brother-sister kind of rivalry. We dog on each other a lot, but at the end of the day, like if somebody else ever came for Connor, I would be the first person to step in and defend him. But no, definitely more of the brother-sister dynamic than what the people on Facebook wanted it to be. So just go ahead and shut that down. So thank you for saying that, Cody. Take it away.
No comment. I'm going to stay out of the HR office today. Anybody but Fatone Bauda. Fatone may be watching today. Fatone, get in the comments. Let us know you're watching. You could see them fighting in the back seat, and BA's turning around. Is I'll turn this car around. And your dad used to reach his hand back there just to slap anybody. He just wants to calm it all down. I want to call the dog, says Alan. That sounds good. We'll do a few more comments here, and we'll start wrapping up. Yeah, Connor tries to hide that Penn State pick. But,
yes.
We had to call him out for that.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate you, DT.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who has decided to stay and sit with us through this. I know we're never going to be anywhere in the same league as Brandon, but we really do enjoy the chance that we get to do this because we don't get to do live shows very often. And so it is so funny to see how you guys interact, and also just knowing that there's a community of people that are bonded together through a show like DawgNation Daily, and how you're all friends outside of this. And so anytime that we get to do this, it's always such a pleasure. So we appreciate y'all even just like sticking around and knowing that we can help Brandon through this really tough time in his life, and that he trusts us enough. That's the biggest thing.
Somebody's saying Coach Rick, have him come out there. One thing I think about, because Coach Rick was at the press conference yesterday, we talk so much about like guys like Jake. Oh, what if you'd have been in the NIL era, and how different would things have been, or some of these players playing now that would have been back then. I'd like to think about Coach Richt. Like, Georgia was the top 12 team for year after year. Georgia would have been in the playoffs so many times under Mark Richt. And you think back to the 2012 Alabama game, the game wouldn't have mattered. Both teams were already in the playoffs at that point if you're a 12-team playoff. You think about 2007, the team that gets left out of the playoff there. So there's so many moments that Coach Richt career would have looked totally different. And those teams were really hot, by the way, late in the season. Nobody wanted to play them. How different will be a look at Coach Rick's era if we were in the playoff? Now it is what it is. You are where it is, but it's fun to think about how we would have thought about Mark Rick differently if he's a playoff contender 5 out of 7 years at times in his career.
Somebody has brought this up, and I really need you to lock in for this, Cody, because I could not agree more. This comes from DMart on YouTube. My favorite episode ever is when Cody lost his mind on Connor for picking terrible DGDs. This also happens to be my favorite episode. Brandon was gone for something, and so it was me and Connor and Jeff, and then Cody was producing from the studio, and we did our Mount Rushmore of DGDs. Now, maybe I was at fault for the interpretation that I took as a DGD. I thought it was very easily assumed what I meant by that. And then was it Connor that took Andrew Thomas with the first pick? And Cody, I have never seen Cody unleash on someone in that way. And at first I was like, oh, this is so funny. And then I realized that Cody was being serious. And I think if you go back and watch the video, like I have to put my notes over my face to disguise how red it's getting. And me and Jeff are just making eye contact like, oh my God, this is absolutely happening. Maybe we'll have to go back and find the link. Also happens to be my favorite episode of all time. I didn't even know that Cody had that in him, and it was it was amazing. So, DMart, yeah, you know what? I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
That was almost another HR office day for me. Some things just get me riled up, and Georgia football is probably one of them. It's funny because I shoot all these games on the sideline, and I'm pretty cool about all of it. I've gotten to the point in my life where I can watch this team that I grew up rooting for and just have that kind of even keel attitude about it because I got to do work. I'm doing my job. If y'all ever watch me watch a game at home, like if there's games, because there was games I didn't go to for a few years when I was working other places, my kids are like, Dad, what is wrong? Like I get fired up sometimes with some of that, although I can keep it pretty even keel when Georgia's scoring a game-winning touchdown in front of me because I got to get the shot. But you see me at home, I'm screaming and throwing things.
All right, we'll take just a few more comments. Let's see. I know there's some people.
So funny y'all remember that, though.
No, that was – I go back and watch that, like, semi-regularly. It was perfect. It was just the fact that he took it with the first pick of the Mount Rushmore DGDs. First one, Andrew Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, y'all know. And Connor, it's not – He knows better than that. A guy who, touts Brock Bowers and the whole thing was like we had not gotten to Herschel Walker and we were like pick 9. And I'm like, bro, like we cannot, like you can argue with me about, who your favorite quarterback was. Was it Matthew Stafford or but like you got to have Herschel in there.
All right, Cody, any final thoughts? Because we got to.
No, thank you guys for doing it. We'll,
Yep.
We got a lot of shows coming up tonight. Kaylee's going to be on there talking about SEC schedule stuff. And then also, Before the Hedges tomorrow, where you're going to have that guest list and talk about the Kirby copter that was out and about all over the place. So plenty of good stuff coming this week.
Yeah, me and Connor tonight for the schedule release. I completely agree with you guys. I think they're just going to find a way to wreck Georgia's life, but also give them like 1 or 2 games where it's like, oh, you should say you're welcome. So excited to go through that tonight and then back for DawgNation Daily tomorrow and then me and Jeff tomorrow night. But again, just thank you to all of you who decided to sit through this with me and Cody. We try our best. We have such a good time doing it, and none of it would be possible without you guys. So make sure you check out R.S. Andrews. And then speaking of R.S. Andrews, we also have the return of Go With The Flow after having a bye week. I'll go ahead and spoil it for you guys. I'm currently on top of the leaderboard, so I'm excited for the other guys to find that out tomorrow too. But now y'all know. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you right back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily and tonight for the schedule show.